Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I am your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF. And it's Thursday, which not only means it's NFL game day, but it also means that, as always, I'm joined by the great Kate Magdziuk. Kate, you ready for week 2?
Oh, I am so ready. I'm hoping that we get injury mode turned off this week and that we have a relatively clean slate, because I'm going to be honest, week 1 kind of upended plenty of my dynasty rosters, redraft roster. Like it doesn't matter what kind of fantasy league you're playing in. Week 1 probably kicked you in the booty just a little bit, but that's why we're here to come back, regroup, and get you on track for week 2.
Yeah, man. Week 2 or week 1 is always like a nice reminder of, a good reality check, right? After we're feeling pretty good after our drafts. Yeah. And then week 1 comes around and, like you said, gives us a nice swift kick in the behind, throws a few goose eggs into our lineup like Drake London and company. And yeah, hopefully week 2 we can kind of regroup here and put things together a little bit more consistently. But yeah, I'm excited. I love that we actually have 2023 data to pour through now, even though some of the games probably aren't the best samples to trust for different reasons, looking at you, New York Giants. But still really nice to have football back and put this data to work for us so that we can set our lineups for week 2, stack up some fantasy W's. And we're going to get into it here. We're going to go game by game in just a minute. But first, I do want to give a quick shout out to our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. Fall is all about the back to school and back to routine checklist. And the most important task on that list should be securing your family's financial future, starting with life insurance. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it quick, easy, and affordable to protect your family so you can get back to enjoying life. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, meetfabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states, prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, let's start things off with a kind of a quick hitter for the Thursday night football game. Minnesota Vikings, Philadelphia Eagles. Kate, week 1 wasn't an ideal start for the Eagles fantasy options, specifically Jalen Hurts, who finished as QB 18 for the week, Dallas Goedert, who put up a nothing burger. We have to expect at least somewhat of a bounce back in week 2 here, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We didn't get Jalen Hurts in the preseason. I think this is kind of the tradition we're seeming to see here, where these quarterbacks that didn't get any reps in the preseason kind of start out a little bit slower. This is going to be an interesting matchup. Kenneth Gainwell ruled out after kind of dominating that entire backfield here in week 1. So going to be interesting to see what this pecking order looks like. I think we have to assume that Rashad Penny will be active. So this might be his time to shine and could be an interesting option, especially in DFS. But, Rashad Penny, we know when he's touched the ball, he's looked pretty darn efficient. Would not be surprised at all if he finishes in RB2 territory if they get him some gosh darn carries here on Thursday Night Football.
That's the hope, right? That he could potentially win this job back because, yeah, we want to see Rashad Penny with a bigger workload, obviously, than, he didn't play last week, but we want to see him kind of be at least that lead running back as far as carries goes, because we know how efficient he could be with those touches. So that'll be interesting to see. I know, DeAndre Swift is going to be a little bit more involved, I would think, this week as well, with Kenneth Gainwell out. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's hard to kind of trust the Eagles backfield right now. So I don't know that I'm starting them right away this week, but I definitely do want to see, what the usage looks like, because there is still a few deeper leagues where I have to start DeAndre Swift, but not excited about it. That's for sure. But somebody that
Dallas
I'm also
Goedert also. Huh?
yeah, so that
What do we
was
think?
yeah, literally the one I was going to say. I'm still starting Goddard this week. I mean, we kind of mentioned it last week. We said that that New England game was going to be a tougher matchup for Goddard in week 1 against Belichick's defense, facing guys like Kyle Duggar, Marcus Jones out of the slot. So it definitely turned out worse than I imagined. I didn't think it would be that bad where he'd get nothing, but at least this week it's a bit better of a matchup on paper for Goddard against the Vikings linebackers and secondary. So I'm still trusting him. I think you have to. I know the target rate was was not good. So
2.6% of receiving
2.6.
snaps he was targeted on. That is not good. But the good news is he did play 93.4% of offensive snaps, ranked 6th among tight ends with 39 routes run. Like, this wasn't a situation where Dallas Goedert was like being outplayed or out-utilized by another tight end on the team. They just kind of moved away from him in this game. And I think that's totally fine. I think, this is, you have to, I think game plan for a Bill Belichick defense. And the way they game plan, was to lean more on these wide receivers, which it worked. They got the win, even if it wasn't as dominating a win as we've been used to seeing over the past season. But Dallas Goedert, I think all of the, the snap count usage, like all of that is there. And there's no other red flags to me that say this is going to be a long-term concern. We've seen, a 21% target share from him, from Jalen Hurts to Dallas Goedert since this duo connected. Back when Jalen Hurts first took over the job. I don't think that's suddenly going to disappear and whittle away to absolutely nothing. I'm fine going back to the well on Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, nothing's really changed with this offense. It just happened to be, a down week because of the defense that they faced and the way that the game plan ended up working out. But I'm absolutely fine starting him again this week, and obviously expecting better than a 0. If it's another 0, I start to get a little bit concerned. But like you said, there's enough history there with Goddard in this offense to still trust him kind of going forward. But on the Minnesota side of things, how are you feeling about this Vikings offense? I know they did a pretty good job pass blocking against the Bucs last week, but facing a tougher defensive line in the Philadelphia Eagles this week. So how are you feeling about your Vikings options in week 2?
You don't love it, but I still think there's so much volume possibly to be had here, especially if this does end up being a high scoring matchup. The Minnesota Vikings, they struggled last week, like despite the fact that, they had all these weapons, they did struggle. They lost to the Bucs. We didn't get exactly what we probably pictured. I think Justin Jefferson, like the look on his face at the end of that game said everything you needed to know about how this game went for the Vikings. I expect them to bounce back again, get in mid-season form quicker rather than later. And I don't think that this Vikings defense has done enough to, keep them competitive necessarily. Like, I think this is going to be an offense that is going to have the burners on at all times, much like we saw to close out last season. Like, this offense needed to play catch up. There was some garbage time involved, just trying to play catch up for some of those lapses in the defense. And I think that's going to continue. Don't love the defensive line matchup, especially, but I still think like you start your players. The one player I'm kind of like on the fence about, like Alexander Madison, you love the workload. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, you're starting. What do we think about Jordan Addison? Caught a touchdown in his debut, looked pretty solid. Any questions? Like, obviously, TJ Hawkinson is going to be quote unquote the wide receiver 2 for this team. How is your comfort level with Jordan Addison heading into week 2?
Yeah, week two, I obviously I want to see the snaps go up for him. I know still playing behind KJ Osborne in the wide receiver group, but I think there's potential that he just keeps getting more opportunities as the weeks go on, especially after showing what he can do last week. And I don't mind like the matchup against the Eagles secondary, just because they're kind of banged up a little bit too. Like that entire coverage unit is kind of depleted at this point. I know the defensive line still one of the best in the league, but then if Kirk is able to get time to get the ball off, there's no James Bradbury, no Reed Blankenship, who's played really well for them at safety, no Nakobe Dean, who's their top linebacker. So there's potential there for this offense, at least the passing offense, to kind of get going. And if Addison sees a few more snaps, I think there's potential that Kirk continues to go to him, especially after coming up with the big touchdown last week as well. So I'm excited about Addison, but like kind of more cautiously optimistic, I guess, just because we know that those snaps aren't fully there yet.
Yeah, I think that's very much fair. Obviously TJ Hawkinson, you're lighting up on fire. And there's not, I think, a lot of question. I think you kind of know what this Vikings offense is right now. And I think it's going to be fairly predictable for the time being in terms of like projecting that overall usage. And I think that fantasy managers should probably feel some comfort in that, honestly, because this is probably one of like the only offenses where we can really say, I feel like I kind of know what this is week in and week out, at least for the time being. Yeah,
I'm with you 100%. So looking forward to that game tonight. We know Thursday night games can tend to be a little bit weird sometimes. So we'll see. Hopefully we get like a nice high powered shootout, because there's plenty of fantasy weapons in this game, but we'll see what happens tonight. And for most people listening to this, we'll probably have already seen it. So let's move on to the Sunday slate here and talk about the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. So Bengals, kind of another offense that let us down last week. Are you concerned about the Cincinnati offense after that disappointing week one?
I'm not, generally speaking. I mean, we saw this last year. Same offense, same disappointing, performance coming out of the gate in week one. Joe Burrow missed, training camp, missed the preseason. I think generally speaking, like, it doesn't matter how many millions of dollars you have in your pocket. It's going to take a second to get back into game speed and get back into a rhythm with these receivers. T Higgins, going back to the well there, had 8 targets, didn't catch a single one of them. Found him on some missing persons flyers floating around my city on Monday morning. But, this is just one of 5 games in his entire career that he's gone catchless. All of those previous instances where he went without a catch in a game, he had either 0 or 1 target. So like, this was a massive outlier in terms of Higgins and that inability to connect with Joe Burrow. But I think expecting them to kind of grease the wheels, and honestly, same thing on the Baltimore Ravens side of the ball. Like, I think we didn't necessarily see them in mid-season form. I think this is still an offense. It's kind of finding its rhythm, finding its identity. Didn't have Mark Andrews here. Hopefully he'll be back in week 2, if not week 3. But kind of a similar situation for both of these teams, which is why I generally, like, you're starting your studs here, but not overly bullish on any of these fantasy assets, especially in like a DFS format. I'm not sure this is going to be like a high scoring shootout here, like we're hoping our Thursday night football matchup will be.
Yeah, I'm with you. And look, I'm not concerned about the Bengals offense either. I'm with you 100% there. And we talked about it in the week 1 preview, right? We said that, the Browns defensive line and their defense was legit. And we talked about Burrow's history against the Browns and just kind of being, pessimistic about what his potential could be in week 1. And I kind of feel a little bit the same going into week 2 here against the Ravens. Again, it's hard to sit Jamar Chase and T Higgins, even Joe Burrow, but again, it's tempering expectations here because this Ravens defense is very good. As far as the Ravens offense goes, I thought we were going to see them be a little bit more pass heavy in 2023. So it's only been 1 week, but so far they were still a top 10 team in run rate. So not the biggest shift that we expected to see. But I do wonder if Mark Andrews potentially coming back this week, and with J.K. Dobbins now out for the year as well, if we see more of that shift here in week 2. They did deploy a higher rate of 11 personnel in week 1 than we've ever seen from them in the past. But again, with Mark Andrews in the lineup, we'll get a better picture of that as well, as I'd imagine. But I think the big thing for me is Zay Flowers, right? I mean, he looked like a legitimate weapon on in week 1. He led the team in targets with 10. 60% of them came on third down. So those 6 targets led the entire league in week 1 on third down. Very encouraging, I think, that they went to him so often and in crucial situations, manufactured a bunch of touches for him to get the ball in his hand as well. So just a great start. And again, we'll see if that usage is as strong with Mark Andrews back in the lineup. But I love the start for Zay Flowers. Are you trusting him if Mark Andrews is back in the lineup this week?
I'm less bullish if Mark Andrews is back in the lineup. If he's not, I'm going to light Zay Flowers up with full confidence. But I kind of want to see what the personnel usage actually looks like with Mark Andrews. Like, we might see some different usage in terms of their overall personnel when you've got Mark Andrews in that mix. He's kind of for me, he's one of these players that I think is monumental enough that he kind of changes your overall approach and game plan. So if he's there, I'm not looking to necessarily start Zay Flowers. I don't think it's like the worst matchup in the world, but I prefer just to kind of wait out, see that usage. But you've got to love what you saw. 4 forced missed tackles after receptions. Like, this dude looked like a running back after the catch with the way that he was manipulating defenders and running up the field. Like, for a smaller guy, he just looked like he had that oomph about him, passed the eye test by a mile, and you love to see that. But I think probably the bigger question is, do we have faith in the run game for the Baltimore Ravens with J.K. Dobbins out? Like, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Gus Edwards, who this team knows very well, has gone back to time and time again when we have seen similar injuries for J.K. Dobbins? Or is it just like, could this actually be the Justice Hill breakout? Saw 2 carries inside the 5, which you love to see. Those are very valuable carries for fantasy football. Saw, targets. Like, it feels like, maybe Justice Hill actually is going to get the more valuable touches here for fantasy, even if Gus Edwards is sort of their primary back on first and second down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we talked about this I guess it was in the recap show or on the waiver wire episode. I can't remember with Nate, but talking about which one to kind of lean towards. And I tended to lean towards Justice Hill a little bit as well because of those goal line touches, like you said, and potential maybe for more work in the passing game, even though there's not like a ton of opportunity for a running back in the Baltimore offense there. It's still a little bit more encouraging, a little bit more of weight towards the higher value opportunities for Justice Hill, I think, that more so than Gus Edwards. So I do want to see it. I'm not really trusting anybody against this defensive line here, or against against the Bengals. The Bengals are still a good defense. I mean, I don't know. I want to see this one a little bit more, because when Dobbins went down last game, it was basically an even split. But I'm with you. If I had to pick one, it's going to be Justice Hill.
Yeah, I think I'm probably just kind of trying to avoid Ravens and Bengals if I can. Obviously you're going to have a hard time sitting T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, but I do think that, again, I'm not expecting this to be a big shootout. I'm expecting this to be a nitty gritty AFC North matchup, which generally isn't always, a high flying game for fantasy.
Yeah. I think it's going to be one of 2 nitty gritty AFC North matchups this week.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that one in a little bit. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm trying to avoid these guys as well if I can. But let's go on to the Los Angeles Chargers at the Tennessee Titans. Austin Eckler is questionable with an ankle injury. Joshua Kelly is kind of the clear next man up, and this could be a really nice matchup to get Joshua Kelly into lineups, even if Eckler does play, because we saw those kind of splits last week. They were pretty even in terms of carries, but also the Chargers offensive line are a top 10 run blocking grade in week 1. They tied for second most yards generated before contact per attempt. Titans D-line ranked just 24th in run defense grade. So Kelly, I think, could be interesting if Eckler's out or if he's limited with a potential ankle injury here. He was only one of 2 running backs last week who actually carried the ball at least 10 times that didn't have a single stuffed run. So that was a loss or no gain. So as somebody that was, a pretty hot waiver ad this week, I think there's potential here for Kelly to make it into a number of starting lineups against Tennessee. What do you think?
I think that I'm not as bullish here on Kelly, even if he does get this volume that you're projecting. I know a lot of people just spent up a lot of fab on Kelly. I think he's a fine volume play if Austin Eckler's out, but even for the, lack of, prowess in terms of, run blocking efficiency, or run defense efficiency, like this Tennessee Titans defense has generally been an inefficient matchup for opposing running backs dating back to last season, allowing just the second fewest fantasy points per game. The only rushing defense that has allowed fewer is the San Francisco 49ers defense, which we know is downright suffocating, allowing an average of just 3.34 yards per rush attempt to opposing running backs. There's just not been a ton of productivity there. And I'm not willing to necessarily go to the well there unless I have to, or unless, I'm struggling to find some more favorable matchups. Cause it's so interesting because it's one of those situations that you feel like the Titans should be giving up more than they are, but they haven't been. And
yeah,
I don't trust this defense. I think they continue to surprise me. I feel like week after week, even when the numbers don't necessarily make sense, they continue to stifle opposing running backs for fantasy. And maybe I've been burned one too many times, John. I don't know.
Who knows, right? I mean, the Mike Vrabel thing, the factor there with him kind of running that defense has been consistent, right? Like you're right, they have been very good. I'm just kind of hopeful. Like I think the usage was there for Kelly. I thought the Chargers offensive line did a better job than what I expected in week 1. So I guess more optimistic, but I'm with you. It's like a borderline play at best. You're not starting him over any like clear starters. Obviously, he's more of like in the flex kind of streamer territory more than anything. But yeah, other than that, I mean, the Chargers offense is another one. We pretty much know what it is once outside of the running back situation right now. But for the Titans side, anything that you want to see in this game? Because there was some interesting usage, at least in the backfield for Tennessee last week.
Yeah, we had rookie Tajay Spears out snap. Derrick Henry didn't get the touches. So, not necessarily like looking to start Tajay Spears, but I do think that the presence of him on the field is pretty darn interesting. Again, wasn't really getting touches, very significantly when he was on the field, but that usage and his sheer presence on the field is something I think we need to continue to monitor week after week, because if he does start it, if that touch total does start to increase and kind of reflect his presence on the field a bit more, you might be looking at an offense that, has room for both Tajay Spears and Derrick Henry. And I don't know what that looks like, but I think, obviously they don't really have a solidified answer at quarterback right now. So I think, yeah, if they have 2 running backs that they can have as a 1-2 punch, why not lean into that while you figure out what the heck you're going to do with the passing game? And Tajay Spears, like he looks good, man. He looks like the eye test, he's passing it. And that's all you can ask for him to do in the limited opportunity he's been seeing so far.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Tyjae Spears. It was an exciting prospect kind of coming out, and it's nice to see him get some more opportunity here. But yeah, not somebody that I'm starting. I still happily starting Derrick Henry just because once he does get those touches, we know how dominant he is with them. But yeah, if that opportunity is starting to decrease a little bit, you have to move him at least down the rankings some here with Tyjae Spears factored in. But yeah, this is still going to be a pretty run heavy offense, I would think, because Tannehill did not look good last week. I'm just hoping that he can get the ball in the hands of Chico Conquo because, man, I'm still having visions of him missing him down the sideline on that deep throw. It's too upsetting. So I need to see some positive regression there for Chico Conquo and his opportunity because yeah, I got too much Okonkwo shares to let this happen with Tannehill at under center here. It's too upsetting.
I think that's totally fair. I think hopefully we're going to see some overall positive regression for this passing offense. I do think like I'm probably the last person here standing that thinks, maybe Ryan Tannehill isn't as bad as he appeared to be in week one. Maybe he also, like many other quarterbacks this week, needed to shake off a little bit of that rust. Also didn't play, missed a lot of last year with injuries. So maybe we start to see that taking shape a little bit more, but I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see this passing offense, and just the offense in general continue to take some strides forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, Tannehill's a perfectly fine NFL quarterback. It was not an ideal week one, but it is only 1 week, so we don't want to overreact to it too much. He was still, getting the targets to DeAndre Hopkins as well. So we should see him perform pretty well as their wide receiver one there. He pretty much dominated the targets Hopkins did. So that was encouraging to see as well. Just got to see a little bit more accurate passing. And I think he can get there. I'm with you. I think just a little bit of time and some shaking off of the rust for Ryan Tannehill into week 2 here. All right, let's go to the Green Bay Packers at the Atlanta Falcons. So last week, I talked about Jordan Love as a potential streamer and DFS play. I know there were people
man.
Yeah, the people doubted it. They didn't listen, and he finished as QB3 for the week. So, look, we're riding the hot hand this week. I'm rolling him out there again because I kind of love the matchup again. It's another one where the Packers offensive line going against an Atlanta defensive line is a pretty big mismatch. Green Bay's O-line earned the 3rd highest pass blocking grade in the league last week at 83.6. And they allowed the lowest pressure rate of the week as well. Atlanta's defensive line better than last year, but pretty much one of the worst teams still in the league. They were 5th highest average time to pressure as well last week at 2.73 seconds. So Jordan Love should have another clean pocket again to throw from. He threw all 3 of his touchdowns last week from a clean pocket. No turnover worthy plays. Potentially Christian Watson back as well. Are you in on the Jordan Love hype with me for week 2?
I'll roll with it. I think you can definitely have a worse matchup. Like I think maybe until proven otherwise, especially if you get Christian Watson back into that mix. But I think the biggest showing across the board here with Jordan Love, like whether or not you want to start him for fantasy, is that this offense looks competent. And that I think is like the one thing I really wanted to see coming out of the gate in week 1 was that this offense could move a ball, and it absolutely could. That Jordan Love, was able to execute the offense, and he absolutely was. Love the usage for our guy Luke Musgrave. Got a really nice target down the field that might have been a touchdown if he didn't get like kind of turned around a little bit on it. I think all things considered, good stuff from this Green Bay Packers offense. Now you have Aaron Jones dealing with, I think, a hamstring. Is that right? Yeah. AJ Dillon coming off a terrible efficiency effort here. If Aaron Jones is out, how bullish are you on AJ Dillon in this matchup?
I think I'd feel okay with Dillon. I know last week wasn't like a great example, especially compared to how efficient Aaron Jones was with his touches. He was amazing, but obviously the hamstring injury So I like the matchup again, even for the Packers running game here. I think there will be opportunity for AJ Dillon. I don't think they're gonna lean on Jordan Love to make him, pass the ball a ton. There's still going to be opportunity there for the running backs, and in this case, it could potentially be significantly AJ Dillon. So if Aaron Jones is out, I wouldn't mind starting AJ Dillon in week 2 here.
Yeah, you mentioned that offensive line, defensive line matchup. Let's talk about the other side of the ball, because this is probably the one burning question every single fantasy manager has is, can you start Kyle Pitts? Can you start Drake London? And why doesn't Arthur Smith care about my fantasy team? It's rude.
I know. And the fact that he keeps saying that he doesn't care about the fantasy teams either,
it's
just
almost like he kind of cares. It's like the overemphasis on the fact that he does not care about fantasy football just makes me think like he had some horrific loss, like as a child or as like a guy in college, where he was so traumatized by fantasy football that he made it his personal life goal to become an NFL coach and ruin the hopes of fantasy football managers for the rest of his life in perpetuity. That is what it feels like. But for me, I'm not starting either of these guys. I don't feel comfortable. I think what you're going to get is a lot of like big fat zeros, big fat, less than 10-point outings. And then of course, like you're going to keep them in your lineups because you feel like you have to. And then the moment you finally decide to sit them, they go off for probably like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns apiece. I don't want to deal with this passing offense anymore. And you know what? If the run game keeps working out the way that it seems to be working, why would they go to the passing offense? Because Arthur Smith doesn't care about our fantasy teams. What are you doing with these two? I'm gonna call them both receivers, because that is what Kyle Pitts is. What are we doing?
Man, it's tough. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with them, because I got Kyle Pitts in a couple leagues, and one of them I'm choosing between Kyle Pitts, Hunter Henry, and Chigo Okonkwo, and I'm still leaning Pitts, but it's like there's part of me that's like, why wouldn't I try Hunter Henry this week after last week? And
I would go with Hunter Henry there.
Yeah, I know it's so tempting, but I keep having these visions of the upside for Kyle Pitts and me benching him and finally getting that upside, and then it going to shit the next week after I bench him again, or when I do start him again. So it's so hard, man. I might end up going Hunter Henry this week. It's the Packers defense, I think, is good enough. That defensive line is good enough to create pressure to the point. And then you got Jair Alexander out there as well. So Drake London's another one. I benched Drake London. I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin in a league. I think those guys were close for me. So it's another one. It's just not an ideal matchup for these Falcons receivers. I mean, if you can afford to, I think you probably bench them. Hunter Henry's probably the latest I'd go as far as like other options. It feels so gross though. I can't stand it.
Hey, tight end 1 overall in week 1, baby. Let's go back to that well, because I actually think it's kind of an intriguing matchup, if you will. We'll talk about that matchup here in a little bit, but definitely interesting up against that Miami Dolphins defense. But all right, so we're both out on the Atlanta Falcons, and now that we have said that out loud, I'm excited to see them go off this week.
Yeah. Now that we've said it out loud, everybody start their Falcons, because they're going to go off as we. We'll take the bullets here, and our teams will lose while you guys take the wins, and hopefully they do go off, because I would be happy to see that, even though it would hurt some of my fantasy teams. So
hashtag for the fans.
That's right.
We are here for you, folks. We are here for you.
That's right. All right, let's go to the Las Vegas Raiders at the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen, not the greatest start last week, through 3 interceptions to Jordan Whitehead. So what are your feelings here on the Bills and Raiders? Do you think this is a good bounce back spot for Josh Allen and the Bills?
I think this is a fine bounce back spot. Like this, the turnovers, they're not new for Josh Allen. This has been an ongoing problem, especially in the red zone. Like it's just been kind of a lot of boneheaded decisions. And yes, he probably needs to reel it in a bit, but I think that's a lot of kind of what Josh Allen brings to this mix, right? Like you bring the YOLO mentality, you sling it up and you ride. And sometimes that doesn't work out, especially against the Jets secondary, which I wouldn't, I think early on they kind of were a little bit tepid on offense, like way too much involvement from Deontay Hardy, not targeting Dalton Kincaid, far enough down the field. Like, and then it went so far in the opposite direction. Like they've got to find some middle ground here. But again, the turnovers are not new for Josh Allen. This has been an ongoing issue for him. And over the last 3 seasons, he has been a top 5 quarterback in 54% of his games, which that percentage in the top 5 leads all quarterbacks in that span for fantasy football. Has been a quarterback 1 in 72% of games. One of only 2 quarterbacks that have finished over 70% of their games in that span, with QB1 finishes in more than 70% of games. And that other quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. Like, these turnovers have been a problem the entire time that he's been producing for fantasy. He'll get back on track. This entire offense, like, they're at home. I think that's going to be, a nice factor. This is going to be a very hostile environment. For any other team to come into. The Raiders coming over from the West Coast. Like, I think this is going to be a fine matchup. Going back to Josh Allen, I'll go back to the well with, obviously Stephon Diggs. I will even, consider flexing Gabe Davis in this matchup. I'm not scared of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, the Las Vegas Raiders, I think, have a lot more to be scared of the Buffalo Bills. On the road, you have Jimmy Garoppolo, who had a pretty solid week 1, but a lot of that production was to Jacoby Myers, who didn't practice Wednesday in the concussion protocol after a really scary hit in week 1. Hopefully we see him bounce back soon, because that seems like a pairing that we should really keep a close eye on for fantasy moving forward. But in this matchup, it's Bills or bust for me.
Yep, I'm 100% with you. I mean, Jacoby Myers, that I loved seeing his involvement in the offense last week. That hit looked really bad. So I would be surprised if he played this week. But yeah, Josh Allen, I think top 3 fantasy game potential here against the Raiders as well. And just Gabe Davis, like you mentioned, this is, I think, a good matchup for him. The Raiders were one of the more zone heavy defenses in the league in week 1. So I think there's potential here for Gabe Davis to kind of take advantage of that. All of his production came against zone, where he got nothing against man in week 1. And he's going to get Jacorian Bennett and Marcus Peters. So I know Nick put Gabe Davis as a potential streamer at wide receiver this week in his wide receiver cornerback matchup. So I like Gabe Davis as well this week. I think that's a nice play here. And yeah, hope it would be nice to see Jacoby Myers back. I would be surprised, though, if he does play this game. But Devontae Adams should be just fine. I know he only had the 6 for 66-yard stat line, but he was also targeted on 31% of his routes, which is elite. So I'm not concerned about Devontae Adams in this one either. So those would be the guys for me. And how about the running backs? James Cook, Josh Jacobs. Any interest in those guys?
I think this is, like, in my head, I'm projecting this as a matchup where they're going to scheme to get Josh Allen in positions where he feels comfortable. Haven't seen him have a huge propensity for targeting the running back, so I don't know that that's something they'll work heavily into the game plan. I could be totally wrong, but I mean, James Cook, he's looked great. He's looked explosive. It's just a matter of, like, how many touches is he going to get on a consistent basis? And that's generally been my fear with, investing in James Cook for fantasy.
Yeah, I would agree there. I think James Cook is a cautious play this week if you're going to play him, but I would feel perfectly fine with Josh Jacobs on the other side. I would expect him to kind of bounce back this week. The Bills actually posted the 2nd lowest run defense grade of the week in week 1. So could be a potential matchup to take advantage here as they go against the Raiders. And I know Jacobs wasn't great last week, but I think there's room for improvement in week 2, obviously. So let's go to the Chicago Bears at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I mean, the Bears defense is becoming one to target for me, like already this year. Specifically, their defensive line. We talked about it with the Packers last week. I think we kind of go back to it. At least I feel that way against Tampa Bay here. The Bears ranked dead last in pass rush grade in week 1. They were 30th in pressure rate, 25th in quick pressure rate. The Bucs O-line ranked 7th in pass blocking grade, and they allowed the 3rd lowest pressure rate. So I think I'm okay, like if I have to, plugging in Baker Mayfield as a potential streamer this week, and maybe even stacking him with Mike Evans in like a DFS play. So it may sound crazy, but there is leagues where I have to play Baker Mayfield in deeper leagues with Aaron Rodgers going down. But Mayfield earned the 3rd highest passing grade from a clean pocket in week 1. He threw for 2 touchdowns, no turnover-worthy plays on those dropbacks. I think that advantage in the trenches helps keep him clean here in week 2. And he's got the weapons to potentially give us some fantasy production. So is that risky, playing Baker Mayfield in week 2?
It's risky, but I do think the matchup is like complementary to that. I mean, Baker Mayfield, even last week, QB 13, which if you would have told me ahead of week 1 that Baker Mayfield was the QB 13, I would have told you were crazy. The Bears, in terms of coverage, 6th worst PFF coverage grade. Kyler Gordon going to IR with a hand injury that was announced today, Thursday. Bears allowed 3 receiving touchdowns in coverage, and I think this is going to be just a fine matchup. Like if you don't feel comfortable starting Baker Mayfield in this matchup, you're not comfortable, I feel like, starting him really in any matchup whatsoever. Yeah. Even at this point, like kind of interested in, some like as a deep DFS play, kind of curious about undrafted free agent rookie running back Sean Tucker in this matchup for, these very reasons, the struggle the Bears have defensively. Rachaad White didn't look great with the workload he got in week 1, was not efficient as a rookie. Like maybe we see a little bit of a swerve towards Sean Tucker, but for me, the bigger questions come on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, so this was an interesting deployment last week, right? For Chicago, the running back, the backfield there. We thought it was going to be Khalil Herbert, right? We both felt pretty decent that Herbert was going to handle the large majority of the workload. Wasn't really the case, unfortunately. We saw a much more even split with Roschon Johnson getting involved, specifically taking the work on passing down. So, and in the 2-minute drills. So I don't know. Is this too much of a rotation to trust at this point in week 2?
I think yes. If you're in a redraft league, full PPR formats, I'll give a shout out to Roschon Johnson, who I think is a decent stash or a decent in case of emergency option. If you have maybe an Austin Eckler and or you're worried about his status, but led the running backs with 17 routes run, was kind of the go-to guy to close out the rest of that game. Highest PFF pass blocking grade among these running backs. I very encouraged by his usage specifically as a receiver. Got a little bit of work out of the slot, 7 targets, 6 receptions, 35 receiving yards. Like you like that. But the biggest and probably weirdest anomaly for me throughout almost probably all of the week 1 slate was what was going on with DJ Moore. 2 targets, 2 receptions, just 25 yards. But Darnell Mooney figured into this game a lot more than I projected. Tied for a team high 7 targets, had 4 receptions, 53 receiving yards, and a score. I don't know that you can trust that every day, but any concern at all for the usage? Played primarily out of the slot, 78.3% of snaps out of the slot to be exact. We just didn't see DJ Moore get those targets out wide like I think we all had kind of hoped based on what we saw throughout the preseason.
Yeah, I was worried about the matchup last week, and we did touch on it a little bit, and going up against Jair Alexander as well. And so I'm not too concerned about it because it was one of the harder matchups, I think, for the Bears in week 1 there. I like the matchup a little bit more, obviously, this week against Tampa Bay. So I'm okay with DJ Moore this week. I think, that he gets another opportunity here to kind of be that wide receiver one in Chicago. We saw it in the preseason that Justin Fields would go to him. Just didn't work out, obviously, for the first week. So I'm not panicking on DJ Moore just yet, but it was definitely a lower stat line than I guess I would have expected, even expecting a tougher matchup in Green Bay.
Yeah, and even for Justin Fields, I think seeing kind of some surprises here. Like, I have not seen a high A dot. Like, I think literally a 0-yard A dot in the preseason. Follows that up in week 1, just a 3.6 yards average depth of target. You want to see him targeting deeper down the field, and maybe that was by design. Clearly didn't work out for the Bears in week 1. Maybe we see them, start to target a little bit deeper down the field, but I do think that's going to be key to getting DJ Moore some work, to, just unlocking Justin Fields a little bit as a passer and seeing what he can do. Can he do the damage downfield? Is it just his legs? Who knows? But, that's what I want to see out of Fields for week 1. Did lead all quarterbacks in PFF rushing grade. You love to see that, but I really, I want to see him. I want to see him pass the ball. That'd be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would definitely be nice. We talked about wanting to see that improvement from him all off season, right, as a passer, and didn't really see it too much in that game. And to be fair, that Packers defensive line, they were able to generate pressure at a pretty high rate, which was hard to deal with, obviously. So I think that maybe has something to do with the low A dot and trying to get that ball out quickly. But yeah, it should be a better matchup here. The Tampa Bay defensive line not as good as the Packers defensive line. So it's just up to the Bears offensive line, hopefully, to kind of keep him clean at least enough to pass the ball. Otherwise, it's going to be scrambling a lot again, which we also like, but we really want to see that progression as a passer, especially for DJ Moore fantasy managers.
For sure.
All right. Colts and Texans. This one here, where do you want to start? Indianapolis or Houston? Which one is more interesting for you? Because I think there's some interest in both.
I think there's some interest in both. I want to start probably with the Colts offense here because there's a lot, I think, of variables up in the air here. Saw a great debut from Anthony Richardson, a much cleaner debut than I expected from him as a passer. But what I want to talk about is how he's going to match up with this Houston Texans secondary, which I think they actually might be turning a corner in terms of coverage, in terms of this kind of being a matchup to avoid. Last year, didn't allow a ton through the air, but it was largely on the back of the fact that nobody needed to pass against them. This was a defense that you could run all over, and, you just didn't need to pass. But following the bye last year, we've really started to see a decrease in overall efficiency for opposing quarterbacks, opposing wide receivers. Saw Lamar Jackson come out of the gate, and again, like rusty probably, but saw him with an 8.8% turnover worthy play rate, which, led quarterbacks. This was I think the Texans kind of proved themselves as a bigger pain in the butt than a lot of people were probably expecting. And I don't know that I'm overly excited to play a lot of these Colts assets here. I know Michael Pittman had a fantastic week 1. I'm kind of fading this Colts offense against the Texans, and it's in Texas. Am I like overrating the Texans' ability to cover here, or could they be the real deal?
No, I don't think overrating them. I mean, look, DeMeco Ryans coming in and kind of turning this defense around. I don't think it's would be a huge surprise, right? He proved that he was a good coach in San Francisco there. I mean, I know it's a much different personnel. Obviously, he doesn't have like a Nick Bosa or Fred Warner and those guys on the team, but he's got some pieces in place there that he's been able to utilize so far. And yeah, I'm with you. I'm not in love with the matchup for the Indianapolis offense. I think Anthony Richardson is still in play for me this week because I liked what he did as a passer. Obviously loved that he had 10 rushing attempts in the game as well, 40 yards, touchdown on the ground. So yes, please, with more of that. And definitely a better passer than what I anticipated. So I like to see that. Where the ball goes, we could assume Michael Pittman. I just don't know that it'll be as heavily as it was in week one. I think we could see potential for it to kind of get spread around here, as that defense can be maybe one of the more surprise defenses of the year. I'm definitely with you there. So I like Anthony Richardson most of all, but I guess the big question is, will we get RB1 Zach Moss in this game?
Yes.
He was a full participant in practice this week. So, Kate, you got your ear to the Zach Moss streets. What's the word here for Zach Moss?
I think he's a full go. I mean, you could not have like the fantasy gods could not have paved the roads any more smoothly for a Zach Moss breakout game here. Like towards the end of last season, we actually saw, with the Colts, saw a boost in that efficiency when he got a workload. Big surprise. He's one of these running backs that I think his rushing style, he's kind of a bruiser. Like he's one of these running backs that I think takes, a few reps to kind of get going, and he wears down opposing defenses. I do think he's going to have the opportunity to do that quite a bit. And you mentioned the work Anthony Richardson did on the ground. That didn't help Deion Jackson's case at all. But you do hope that, I think it's kind of been an interesting tell in Colts media, especially when Zach Moss is returning and the media is saying, thank God Zach Moss is back. It's a clear indication of how significant they think this tier break is between Deion Jackson, Evan Hall going to IR. But I think like the waiting for Zach Moss feels like it's a very clear cut sign that, this is RB1. I don't think they're going to force the ball to Deion Jackson. I think this is probably a 20 plus touch game for Zach Moss. And, if you want to protect the ball a little bit and you want to, maybe not put your rookie quarterback in a position to test a, pretty decent, developing secondary, what are you going to do? You're going to try to run the ball, whether that be with Anthony Richardson or Zach Moss. I think this could be a run heavy game. And I'm lighting Zach Moss up with confidence. So maybe I was too quick to say that I'm out on the Colts. It turns out I'm not out on I'm out on Michael Pittman, but yeah, this Zach Moss feeling in my heart, that's feeling good, baby.
There we go. So it's Zach Moss, RB1 season. Fire him up. Hopefully, yeah. I'm if we can get that workload that even what Deion Jackson had last week. Deion Jackson was inefficient with his touches. Zach Moss should come in and hopefully be the better option there, which is a positive here for this Colts offense. So I'm excited to see it for sure. On the Texans side of things, I mean, look, the Colts defense, their coverage unit, it was exactly kind of what we expected in week one, right? They're a matchup to take advantage of here. It was a zone heavy defense in week one. They ranked 25th in yards allowed per coverage snap out of zone at 6.31. So Robert Woods, Nico Collins, these are guys that I think are worth in deeper leagues kind of streaming here. Woods specifically had a lot more success against zone, including a 32% target rate against zone versus just 9% against man. Great matchup. Hopefully get some high volume passing game here from the Texans and CJ Stroud like they were last week. I think Stroud had the second most dropbacks in week one, which was wild. So there's potential here for maybe this Houston Texans passing offense as well, which we'll talk about pretty much anytime anyone's facing the Colts defense and coverage, because I don't think they're going to be good. But other than that, Dameon Pierce did not get the third down role that we expected, which was a major bummer because Mike Boone played 10 of 15 third downs. He played 10 of 19 2-minute drills. I know. This is shocking, right? Like, no idea where this came from. They teased us in the preseason that Dameon Pierce was going to have this bigger role, but far from ideal compared to what we expected here. So are you starting Dameon Pierce this week, against guys like James Conner or James Cook or any of those guys, or are you kind of worried about the usage here?
I'm a little bit worried about the usage, but I do think this is, a little bit of a better matchup here. James Conner's like a guy I'm very bullish on this week. So I'd start James Conner over Dameon Pierce here for sure. But Dameon Pierce, I still think he's going to, emerge from this matchup probably with like 15 plus touches. Hopefully we start to see that role grow. I'm getting sick and tired of saying hopefully we see that role grow. Maybe we don't. But I still think I like this matchup against the Colts a bit better than I did last week against the Ravens. So fingers are crossed that we see that usage. I love every time that he touches the ball. He's just such a fun running back to watch. He's just such a tough runner, and I think it's going to translate a little bit better against the Colts than we saw in week 1.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's keep her going here against, we'll go to the Kansas City Chiefs against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The question, we don't know if El Travador will play. Travis Kelce, still up in the air there. I don't know what's going to happen with the Chiefs offense. Will they bench Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore in favor of Rashee Rice? I don't know. Anybody here in Kansas City that you're actually interested in starting this week outside of Patrick Mahomes?
I still like Rashee Rice. It was targeted on a high percentage of his routes run. I do think, based on what we saw, like it seems to have earned more targets. We always say targets are earned. I think Rashee Rice, especially, first career catch, saw that touchdown in the end zone, but it was exactly what I think you wanted to see from Rashee Rice. That was my favorite part of his game coming out of college, was the fact that he can be so friendly to quarterbacks and can find a soft spot, when a play breaks down, and be able to make that translate into a first down, a touchdown. And that's exactly what we saw Patrick Mahomes be able to do, is find him when the play broke down. Would not be at all surprised to see, him earn some increased snaps, some more routes run. And I do think that we're probably going to see Patrick Mahomes target him on those routes, especially he was the best wide receiver on the field, I think, to open up the season. Kadarius Toney, who knows what is good. Like, I think he should be benched, honestly. Like I've said this a million times, like you don't, sit your wide receiver 1 in the Super Bowl for the majority of the game, even if he is a little bit banged up, if you think he's going to be like the key to unlocking your offense. Kadarius Toney is not a wide receiver 1. He proved it. Every player has bad games, but I there's something with this guy, man. I like Kadarius Toney. If there was a start sit show that I did purely based on vibes, Kadarius Toney would go undrafted 10 times out of 10, because there's something with that guy. I don't know what it is, but he proved me right. I feel like in week 1, Rashee Rice is the only guy that I'm really trusting, and that's kind of more of a desperation play. Even the running backs, like what do you do with this running back group? Do you trust Patrick Mahomes? Like, I feel like you have to play Patrick Mahomes, but I think this is a situation that until you get Kelce back in the fold, you're starting Mahomes. I don't think you're starting anybody else in this offense necessarily. And you're probably looking to, supplement some of that lack of upside that Patrick Mahomes might have in the absence of Travis Kelce with some higher upside flex plays elsewhere in your lineup.
I think that makes sense. And yeah, you mentioned the running backs. I think there's at least maybe a possibility that we see Jerick McKinnon get more involved this week and have a bigger stat line. I know he was super disappointing in week 1, just the 1 catch for 10 yards, but I could see them utilizing him more, having a bigger day, because the snaps were there and kind of promising for him. He didn't lead the team in total snaps, but he did get 100% of the goal line snaps, took 6 of 7 third down snaps, 7 of 11 2-minute drill snaps. So even the majority of the short yardage work. So there's, I think, potential. He could be one of those bounce back guys for me this week, especially as the options in the passing game could potentially be limited for Patrick Mahomes. We know that he's utilized McKinnon in that role before, so I think he could kind of come back to being fantasy relevant here. But yeah, I'm with you. Everybody else is just very concerning. Rashee Rice, I think, has the potential to earn a bigger role for sure, because he looked like the best wide receiver for them in week 1.
Which is so scary. Like when rookie Rashee Rice is your far and away the best wide receiver on the field, that's not good. But I do think that, he's doing all of the right things that earn trust and build rapport with your starting quarterback. And if I can build rapport with any quarterback in the league, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes, who can deliver a ball under duress in any circumstance in the entire universe. I think he is definitely one to monitor, though I'm not looking to start him heading into week 2.
Fair. That's very fair. All right. How about the Jacksonville Jaguars? Because we saw Calvin Ridley obviously have that massive game. We talked about that potential for him to blow up this past week. He did. Zay Jones also a nice game there. Christian Kirk, not so much. So concerned at all for Christian Kirk? Are you willing to roll him back out there?
I'm not overly excited about Christian Kirk. I'll say that. And it's not necessarily surprising to me the way that they used him. Played the bulk of snaps out of the slot, which is also what we saw in 2022. So like it wasn't surprising to see him relegated to the slot. Did play a higher percentage of those snaps from the slot, but like the majority of his production last year came from the slot. So I do think there's going to be some positive regression here in the other direction. There's been too much history there of I think him being productive in that position, even if he did play a higher percentage of his snaps there. Christian Kirk has always been a slot receiver. Maybe we see that target percentage go down a little bit, but I think it has to bounce back up eventually. And maybe I'm like totally off my rocker here, and I'm not like bullish on Christian Kirk in any sense of the word. If I can start anybody else, I will. I'm just saying that I'm not ready to like mark his gravestone just yet.
Yeah, that's fair. And look, I think there was enough in week 1 that we saw out of this Jaguars offense to at least create those feelings and validate those feelings, because Calvin Ridley obviously being in the offense changes a lot for that that target distribution there. So I'm with you. I'm fine sitting Christian Kirk this week, and I wouldn't feel bad about it if I had to go elsewhere and pick a different option, because I think there will be better options this week. So anything else for Jacksonville, or you want to go to Seattle, Detroit here?
Seattle, Detroit. I think this one's kind of a more interesting game. We know the Jaguars. I feel like Travis Etienne had a solid game. Trevor Lawrence, solid game. I think they kind of were exactly what I expected them to be. And but who wasn't who I expected them to be? The Seattle Seahawks. They were not who I expected them to be in week 1. Can they bounce back here in week 2? That's my question.
I know. I look, I went on here last week and talked about how the Rams defense was going to be abysmal. And I still think there's a good chance that they'll come back down to earth. But I'm just kind of worried that maybe this had to do with the Seahawks offense being out of sorts more than anything. So I guess that's where I'm with you. I'm feeling a little bit concerned that this offense, was maybe a flash in the pan under Geno Smith, because that Rams defense should have been a very plus matchup for them. It was definitely not. DK Metcalf obviously had the touchdown. So it's something to kind of keep in mind, because I don't think this Detroit team is going to give them an easy matchup by any means. So we know what the usage and everything is for the Seahawks offense. It's just a matter of if they can bounce back against this Lions defense, which by all accounts should be a very good defense again this week. So yeah, I don't know. I'm probably not playing Geno Smith against the Detroit Lions. I probably play DK Metcalf, but that's about it. Kenneth Walker. Yeah, I would play Kenneth Walker, but I'm again not a guy that I'm excited about either. So it's not great for Seattle here heading into week 2. How do you feel about it?
I feel kind of similarly. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I want to give him a shout out because he's a guy that, obviously for Dynasty, especially super high on, was super excited to see him out there. But the thing that I think kind of worried me, I was expecting that he would get a pretty significant chunk, almost all of the snaps coming out of the slot. But we actually saw DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett also rotate through the slot, which, didn't necessarily like that just kind of displaced Jackson Smith and Jigba only played 4 total snaps out wide. with the rest of his snaps coming from the slot. So when DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett were in the rotation at slot, yeah, that wasn't good for Jackson Smith and Jigba. Putting him on ice until further notice.
Yeah, for sure. So we know what the Seahawks offense is right now. We're just hoping that they're potentially better, basically. But I'm not excited about them here in week 2. But for Detroit on their side, I mean, David Montgomery, kind of an interesting target for me this week. I know Jahmyr Gibbs at some point has to get more touches, but knowing with this team, their reliance on veterans and not putting rookies into full-time roles right away, I would not be surprised to see David Montgomery with another bigger workload this week. He carried the ball 21 times in week 1. So I don't think that takes like a massive hit already, even if Gibbs does see a slight bump in touches or snaps. The Lions had the second best run blocking offensive line in the league in week 1. Seattle's D-line was just kind of average. I think we could squeeze some value here out of David Montgomery in week 2, averaged 1.2 yards before contact, which was 12th among running backs thanks to that offensive line, had the 6th lowest stuffed run rate in week 1 among 33 qualifying running backs, but handled all the 2-minute drill snaps, 80% on third down, short yardage, no goal line snaps for the Lions in week 1, but would imagine he gets those as well, just based on the rest of the usage. So I'm kind of riding Montgomery for now until we see Gibbs truly take over this backfield. And like I said, kind of knowing how the Lions like to deploy these rookies early in their careers. I feel okay about him for week 2.
Yeah, I actually agree here. So, looking at David Montgomery, RB13 and half PPR formats to start the year, looked really disappointing when you were watching the game, but I think largely that was because he was playing in tandem with Jahmyr Gibbs, who looked so freaking good. But I definitely agree in terms of the usage there for David Montgomery, in terms of the deployment of rookies. Like they're very clearly going to be easing him in to the mix here. And David Montgomery, I just think is more of that prototypical running back in between the tackles that you're going to use on those early downs, and their usage reflected that. So I think David Montgomery, a fine play, especially until we start to really see a uptick, and that's not to say it could even happen within the next couple of weeks here, that we really start to see this ramp load or this workload ramp up for Jahmyr Gibbs. But until proven otherwise, I think you roll with David Montgomery and enjoy the touches while you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. It's going to happen at some point, right? Gibbs is going to take over. He just looked too good not to, and you don't spend the 12th overall pick on a guy to leave him on your bench. So at some point he's going to take over, but for now, I think you roll with David Montgomery in what should be a decent matchup here. So anything else for the Lions side of the ball that stands out?
No, I still kind of, watching and learning in terms of Sam Laporta. You love his usage, saw 5 targets in week 1, translated to 39 receiving yards, was solid as a pass blocker. Like, you liked everything you saw out of Sam Laporta. But I think, outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, like I think he's really the only primary receiving weapon that I'm really, looking to go all in on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's move on then. And we'll do a quick ad break here from our friends at DraftKings. Football is back in full swing for another week of epic games, and who's got you covered on the action for every single one of them? DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet $5 on football and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Nobody's missing out on the action this season. All DraftKings customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. Get in on the action the NFL Week 2 action with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use code PFF to sign up. New customers can bet just $5 and take home $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code PFF. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text 8-HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus age, varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See dkng.co/football for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. All right. New York Giants at the Arizona Cardinals.
Woo!
Yeah, I mean, what a matchup, right? Look, we said it last week, right? We said Daniel Jones, I think, was going to be benched for us last week. Going against that Dallas defensive line definitely turned out to be the right move, because that was an absolute bloodbath. That New York Giants O-line was not great. But that Dallas D-line was also amazing. So an unfair mismatch there. This week against the Cardinals should be much better, you would think. Their D-line is nowhere close to the level of Dallas. So if the Giants O-line can't hold up against Arizona's pass rush, then I have much bigger concerns for the Giants offense.
Yeah, random idea, they should block for Daniel Jones. Like that would be pretty crazy. Yeah, I think this is going to be a nice like get right matchup. Definitely saw, I think, the Arizona Cardinals not flounder quite as much as I think everybody thought they would coming out of the gate here, but that might have been speaking more to, the Commander side of the ball necessarily than to their defense at this point. I think this is going to be a solid matchup. You're starting your Saquon Barkleys. I think, Daniel Jones, I'm fine going back to the well with Daniel Jones, who I've liked as a late round quarterback. Something to continue to monitor. Like we keep hearing things about Darren Waller, his hamstring, like that being an ongoing issue, was targeted by Daniel Jones, which is great. But, you definitely want to see some more involvement there out of the gate, and you want to see him healthy. On the Cardinals side of the ball, I'm really excited about James Conner this week. Tied for the 11th most touches in week 1, led all running backs with an 86.3 PFF rushing grade, top 3 pass blocking grade among running backs, going up against the Giants, who had a bottom 10 run blocking grade, bottom 5 overall defense in PFF grade. Like, I think this could be a really nice matchup for a running back who is like far and away the team's RB1.
Yeah, you mentioned it, right? Highest rushing grade of week 1 for James Conner, and he did it behind the lowest ranked run blocking offensive line in the league.
That's crazy.
Yeah, this man is literally fighting for his effing life out there. And this Cardinals team is just trying to bury him. We knew, look, he was going to be the top fantasy asset for this team, but he's really just given it his all for us. So got to respect James Conner there and the effort. I'm with you. I got to start him as well, because I don't want to start many other players in this Arizona offense. I mean, the Zach Ertz usage was nice, but I
didn't translate to anything.
Exactly. That's what I mean. I want to see it more consistently before kind of plugging him into any lineups and trusting that usage and production is gonna generate for him, because this Arizona offense, I don't know what to do with it. Hopefully we get Clayton Tune at some point.
Hopefully, but if not, like, I'm just gonna enjoy some PPR production from James Conner. 5 targets, 5 receptions for a whopping 8 yards, and I don't care, because it's fantasy points, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, that is the beauty of playing in a PPR league for sure. All right, so let's go to the 49ers at the Los Angeles Rams. The 49ers are pretty much who we thought they were. Week 1 was the Brandon Ayuk week. Probably a decent chance that it'll be maybe a different receiving option that blows up this week, but either way, I'm plugging all these guys into my lineups. I know that Rams D looked legit last week, although I do tend to think that might have been a bit of like a fugazi performance from them. So we'll see what they look like against the 49ers on both sides of the ball. But I tend to believe that the Rams will probably be humbled in this one by the San Francisco offense. How are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I'm all sides go for the San Francisco 49ers. All signs stop immediately in your tracks for the LA Rams. Just generally you've got fades across the board for me. Especially Cam Akers. We saw his usage in week 1, didn't really get a ton of work until like the 4th quarter, when they were just kind of running this game out, and like, it just the touches weren't overly meaningful. He was super inefficient when he saw them, just 29 scrimmage yards on 22 total touches. Mm-hmm. Like, this is not an offense that I want to be starting my running backs against. The 49ers have allowed just 13.8 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs dating back to last season. Only defense in the league to have allowed fewer than 1,100 rushing yards dating back to week 1 last season. Like, Akers has already struggled with efficiency. And, I didn't think this was a terrible matchup for him either in week 1. So yeah, I'm not going to touch this matchup with a 10-foot pole on the Rams side of things. I think this could get fairly ugly fairly quickly.
Yeah, no, I'm not playing Kyron Williams or Cam Akers in this game. That 49ers D line is just too good. And both of these guys really, they finished inside the top 5 last week in stuffed run rate. Akers was number 1, Williams was number 5. I get that Kyron Williams had a nice, top 10 RB finish last week, but he also had 2 rushing touchdowns, which are going to be much harder to replicate here against the 49ers. So a good waiver wire target at the moment, but not one that I'm plugging into lineups immediately here in week 1. So I'm avoiding the running backs as well. But how about the other hot waiver wire target for the Rams, Puka Nacua, 15 targets last week, 119 yards. Are you trusting the Puka Nacua production in week 2?
I'm not. I'm like I'm ready to be burned at the stake when I'm incorrect. But again, this is I think a offense or a defensive line that's going to generate a ton of pressure on Matthew Stafford. Like when plays break down, when quarterbacks are under pressure, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp had that down. I'm not trusting that Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua are to the same point that he and Cooper Kupp were on. When those plays do break down, I just worry that, again, things could get kind of ugly. And that's not to say that I don't like Puka Nacua. It's that I don't like offensive players against this Rams defense. I don't think he's going to have a lot of time to navigate the pocket with Javon Hargrave, with Nick Bosa. Like, this is probably just going to be pretty ugly. And you're just going to, I for as much fab as you probably spent on him, I'm not looking to start him here in week 2. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like Puka Nacua. I think he's a very interesting prospect. I love that he got 15 targets and that Stafford looked for him often throughout that entire game. But this is a different defense, the San Francisco 49ers here. And look, the Rams offensive line surprisingly pass blocked very well in week 1. But again, Seattle defensive line is not the same as the 49ers defensive line. Like you said, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Drake Jackson last week was a beast as well. So there are weapons here that are going to make things a lot tougher for the Rams. So I'm with you. I think deep leagues is fine for Puka Nacua, but outside of that, he's not one of those immediate plug and play waiver wire pickups in week 2.
Yeah, I think he's going to make his way back. He's going to have another solid outing, but I don't think it's this week.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's go to the Jets and the Dallas Cowboys. Man, what a bummer. We could pretty much consider the Garrett Wilson dark horse for wide receiver campaign, I would think, officially over. Zach Wilson's just not going to let that happen, I don't think. Especially this week against this Cowboys defensive line that we saw light up Daniel Jones and the Lions. And then you take into account that both offensive tackles for the Giants are questionable coming into this game. They both played last week, but they weren't amazing either. So I am staying away from pretty much this entire Jets offense if I can afford to.
If you can afford to, like, the only guy that I'm probably willing to go back to the well on is Breece Hall, who, just looked absolutely fantastic, looks so explosive. You love to see the usage. But like his skill set is probably the only thing that you might bank on to be something of an edge over this Cowboys defense. You just hope he's faster and outruns and is able to, break one tackle. And once he does, he's gone. And I think that's hopefully the one skill set that could give them the edge in the rushing game. But this overall, both of these defenses, very, very strong defenses, especially Zach Wilson, obviously not trusting, Garrett Wilson. I feel like a lot of fantasy managers are going to feel like they have to start Garrett Wilson, and I'm not sure that it's wise if they do this. This quarterback wide receiver pairing has a decent history together, right? Like, don't let this crazy catch that we saw in week one permeate the history that we already had with this quarterback wide receiver duo. In Garrett's 10 games played with Wilson, a quarterback, he has yet to exceed 15 fantasy points in a single matchup. He had just an abysmal floor with Zach Wilson. He had 5.1 or fewer fantasy points in 6 of his 10 games with Zach Wilson starting at quarterback. Disaster.
Yeah. These are the stats that bring like a tear to my eye, because it's truly heartbreaking for Garrett Wilson. Had such
There's
high
only
hopes
so
for
much
him.
he can do to elevate the gameplay of Zach Wilson. But I mean, just, even if it were Aaron Rodgers, I'd still be kind of tepid about this matchup, just given like you've got Micah Parsons, Dante Fowler, DeMarcus Lawrence, like Stephon Gilmore played super well in his debut with the Cowboys. Like, no freaking thank you to all of the above.
Yeah, it is hard to disagree there. I'm with you too on Breece Hall. I mean, I know he's being eased back into action, but he just looked explosive as ever, right? So please give us something to be excited about for watching this Jets offense, and let Breece Hall get more touches, because that's pretty much our only hope at this point. As on the Dallas side of things, I don't know. It felt like it was kind of hard to put too much stock into Dallas's offense from week one, after they kind of dummied the Giants and didn't really need to do anything offensively. Obviously, Tony Pollard, we know that was great to see, but not concerned overall about Dak or CD. Even Ferg over there. I think there will be better game scripts for these guys and this Jets. Even though this Jets defense, I think, is a good one, a very good one. I think they could keep this game much closer, but we could see maybe more optimal usage, at least for the Dallas offense, more than anything, I guess.
Yeah, and worth noting, I'm not sure what the latest status is, so pardon me while I'm like fumbling through my words. Do we think that Brandon Cooks is going to play in this game? Does that change anything for you in terms of being willing to start some of these other assets here?
I don't think I would put Michael Gallup in as an option this week if Brandon Cooks can't play. That's not really a player that I'm overly excited about for this year, even with or without Cooks in the lineup. CeeDee Lamb for sure, I think is definitely the big one, but maybe there's potential there for Jake Ferguson. I know he didn't do much in week one, but again, didn't really have to.
The opportunity was there.
The opportunity was there, exactly. So it could be again, and if no Brandon Cooks is in the picture, that just opens up potentially more targets for Jake Ferguson in the passing offense. So that would probably be the next man up for me that I would be looking at over maybe a Michael Gallup.
Yeah, just pulling up the latest update here. Brandon Cooks dealing with a slight sprain of the MCL. So it doesn't sound great, but they're saying he still has a chance to play. So something to keep an eye on, maybe lowering Dak's ceiling, but I don't think you're trusting Dak in this matchup anyway. So
yeah, it's a tougher one. Yeah, for sure. I am with you there. So that was pretty much it for that game. Let's keep it going here. Let's go to the Washington Commanders at the Denver Broncos. Hey, Sam Howell finished as QB11 last week. We'll take it. And we'll just ignore the fact that there was a decent chunk of this game where the Washington offense really struggled against like a pretty mid Arizona D. But hopefully this is just them kind of taking some time to get out, work out some of the kinks. And if you look at the early part of the game where Howell flashed and had that touchdown to Brian Robinson, and then the late part of the game where he scrambled and into the end zone himself for a touchdown, and kind of ignore the stuff in the middle, I think it was everything that we'd want to see from Sam Howell. But obviously the negative tendencies are still there a little bit. So we'll hope to see that kind of worked out in the weeks ahead. But I don't hate this matchup again for the Washington offense. How about you?
Yeah, I'm not overly scared. Honestly, I'm more concerned for the Denver Broncos side of the ball. Fading Javonte Williams, who got a decent workload also to start the season, was kind of impressed by his touch total here in week one. But man, I think the Washington Commanders are going to continue to be a force to be reckoned with. This defense was absolutely suffocating. They had
Yeah.
three defenders that ranked top 20 in PFF defense grade, or rush defense grade. Like, this was a force to be reckoned with. And we didn't even have oh my gosh, we didn't even Chase Young. We
Chase
didn't even
Young,
have
yeah.
Chase Young in this game. Probably not going to have him in week 2 either, but it doesn't seem to matter because this is a suffocating defense that I'm not looking to really target matchups against any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I wrote up Javonte Williams as an avoid this week in the O-line D-line matchup article, and the Washington defense, the defensive line earned the highest run defense grade, 85.4 in week 1, tied for the third most tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage in week 1. Their average depth of tackle from the defensive line was negative 0.71 yards, which was the best in the league. So Broncos O-line, just about average. I think this could be a big mismatch here. As good as Javonte Williams is at creating after contact, it could be tough sledding against a very, very good defensive line. And then considering the committee usage to it to an extent as well in that Denver backfield, I think Javonte Williams is a fair one to avoid this week where we can. But Jerry Jeudy was back at practice yesterday, I guess it was, but in a limited fashion. So potential that maybe he gets out there this week, but probably not somebody that I am starting in his first week back from injury either.
Yeah, another injury, Greg Dulcich, which could be a decent bump for Adam Troutman, who we saw get a fair bit of utilization here in the preseason anyway. Keep an eye on that. I'm not like looking to start Adam Troutman, but could be something for folks who are streaming the position to keep an eye on. I would just, monitor that usage throughout week 2 because he could end up being a decent pickup for those streaming.
Yes, good call. All right, let's go on to the Sunday night football matchup of the Miami Dolphins and the New England Patriots. Kate, I mean, this Miami offense looked as explosive as we saw them with a healthy Tua last year. I know Raheem Mostert's dealing with a potential injury here. He's questionable. Jalen Waddle's dealing with an oblique injury, also questionable. But what are your thoughts on this game? Do you think we can see Mostert and Waddle still, or any concern at all for their availability?
I'm a little concerned on Mostert just given his overall injury history, but I wouldn't really want to start any backups in his place either. I wouldn't want to start Raheem Mostert in this matchup up against the New England Patriots. Tua had a really successful week 1, overall quarterback 1, but saw the Patriots ranked 8th in pass coverage grade as a unit to start the season. Not loving, them having to go into New England for this matchup. I'm just kind of, fading as much as you can the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, you're playing Tyreek Hill. You're playing Jalen Waddle if active, but that's kind of where it ends for me. Even regardless, if Raheem Mostert is out with an injury, and maybe we see Devin A-Chain get some work, I'm still full fade, but I do think the New England Patriots are kind of in an interesting spot. I'm not overly terrified of this Miami Dolphins defense. We saw them get run all over by the Los Angeles Chargers last week. Is this a good spot for Ramondre Stevenson, who, still saw a lot of work as a receiver? Could be another PPR gold mine or gold mine. Oh my goodness. I can't. Yeah. One of those gold mine things.
Right.
Like that might be what Ramondre Stevenson continues to be for full PPR scoring formats all throughout the season based on what we saw in week 1.
Yeah, it was great to see Stevenson get the large majority of snaps there in the backfield, including third down, 2-minute drill. He got all of that. Only one sample of goal line work, I think, came on a 2-point conversion attempt, and Ezekiel Elliott did get that. But Stevenson had pretty much every single touch on that drive as well. But I'm definitely starting Ramondre Stevenson. I love the matchup here. I would be definitely playing him, no problem, every single week with that kind of usage. I guess I don't mind Hunter Henry and Kendrick Bourne in
Yes.
deeper leagues, but it still feels gross, right? Like we don't know if Mac Jones is going to keep it up. Just because last year was so messy with this team, right? And it's only 1 week so far this year. So I'm tentative, but I really don't mind the matchup. I think, I think Miami was fourth in tight end points allowed last week. So there's potential there for Hunter Henry. I'll be putting him into some lineups and just kind of plugging my nose and hoping that it works. But yeah, Kendrick Bourne's the other one that I'm interested in as well. I thought he had some pretty good usage. So anybody else that you like from New England?
Nobody, but I really like Kendrick Bourne if you're like in a huge pinch. Saw 11 targets, caught 6 of them, 64 yards, led the team with 3 red zone targets, 2 of which came in the end zone and were caught for touchdowns, which is great. The Chargers didn't necessarily need to throw a ton on the Dolphins in week 1, so I don't really think we got to see that secondary tested as much as I would have liked. But I think the usage here is so encouraging that like if you are in need of a spot play, I think you could do worse than Kendrick Bourne at home against the Dolphins.
Nice. All right. There we go. We are rolling with Kendrick Bourne as well. All right, let's go on to the first of 2 Monday Night Football games somehow in week 2. I have no idea. This really confused me last night on the IDP preview pod. I called this the Sunday Night Football game, and I called the other one, the next one, the Monday Night Football game. I really was confused why this was going to get a island game, but it looks like they're only getting an hour of an island game, and then they're going to get buried by Pittsburgh, Cleveland. So
isn't that weird though? Because
it's like super weird.
We've got the first game, Saints Panthers on ESPN, and then you've got the second game on ABC. So this is the same company, remember? So they are just competing with themselves for viewership, which I do not understand. If there is an audience member out there who can please explain to me what in the world this situation is, because I feel like you're just like shooting yourself in the foot, and why? But why?
Yeah. And the fact that it's happening in week 2 as well. Like I remember week 1, we used to get the 2 Monday night games, right? To start the season, it would be like Raiders and Chargers or something like that as the late game for the West Coast. But to start both of these games basically at the same time and to have them competing against each other makes zero sense to me. I have no idea what the hell the NFL is doing. So yeah, you're right. If somebody knows, please let us know, because I honestly have no idea. Yeah. Other than that, New Orleans at Carolina, I think it's kind of a good matchup for Jamal Williams this week, even though, his week 1 wasn't very encouraging. I don't mind to take another shot on him here against a Panthers defense that ranked dead last in run defense grade in week 1. So I don't know. I mean, Jamal Williams, obviously not the encouraging performance that we'd want to see in week 1, but somebody that I think I'm willing to kind of go back to this week in a positive matchup. Is that crazy?
I think that's totally fair. I actually kind of like a few players here on the Saints side of the ball. Tell me if I'm crazy though, because I need to know if I'm crazy. I think Jamal Williams is a good start, but you know what? I also think like he's a very reasonable start. There's another player on this offense that I think is a good start, but maybe not so reasonable. And I need to know if I'm totally and completely insane.
All right, let's hear it.
Rashid Shaheed, wide receiver, 2022 undrafted free agent out of the last year's class. Now, hear me out, right? So ran the fourth most routes on the team in week 1. He was targeted on a whopping 24% of those routes run, including 3 targets of 20 or more air yards. He was Derek Carr's favorite deep threat, and he's been efficient. Averaged 3.56 yards per route run. That ranked 3rd among wide receivers in week 1. Averaged 17.8 yards per reception. A literal perfect passer rating when targeted. Which like all of those efficiency metrics actually, mirrored what he did as a rookie pretty well. Like, and I kind of thought to myself heading into 2023 that he just had like, that was just like a colossal outlier, right? But he performed. And I think if you're in a position where, you need some production here, I think you could do a lot worse than Shaheed against the Panthers, who like didn't allow much in week 1. But like last year, they ranked 4th in fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. And I don't think they got that much better. It just so happened that the Falcons only targeted wide receivers 5 times in the season opener. Like, don't let the fantasy stats allowed skew you here. I do think Shaheed could be a really nice play. And if you're not brave enough in season long leagues, DFS. Am I crazy?
So okay, so I don't think you're crazy because I do like Rashid Shaheed and I think he's a good option for the rest of the season. But I'm just kind of looking at like, I guess matchup wise, I didn't love the matchup against the Panthers here. Just them being more of like a zone heavy coverage team. I think they were top 5 in the league in zone coverages in the first week of the season, where Shaheed more effective against one-on-one man coverage as that deep threat. So he's probably one that I'm just cautious about this week, where I love Olave, I love Michael Thomas this week, but because I don't think the Carolina Panthers coverage unit is so scary that you have to avoid these guys. I just worry like with Shaheed being maybe more of that kind of, a boom bust type production, that this could be one of those weeks with a lower production floor. But you're right. The target rate is all there. The performance is there. He's a great player. I just worry that the Panthers defense is going to be able to kind of focus on him a little bit more, playing a little bit more zone and having a guy over the top versus kind of the one-on-one coverage that he was seeing in a little bit more in week 1 against the Titans, if that makes sense.
That is totally fair. On the Carolina Panthers side of the ball, is there anybody worth playing? Like, Miles Sanders was outplayed by Chuba Hubbard in week 1, and I would not be surprised if we saw Chuba Hubbard get a little bit more work. But I don't love this matchup for Hayden Hurst. The Saints have been, pretty just generally a shutdown defense when it comes to fantasy tight ends. You don't love that. I don't want to start Bryce Young. I don't want to start there's not a single player on this team that I think I'm really looking to start here on Monday Night Football.
No, I'm with you. Bryce Young had a lot of struggles in week 1 to the point where I'm avoiding the passing game as well. Even Hayden Hurst, like I know he paid off as a streamer last week. He finished as tight end 2, but the usage wasn't really ideal. I think we could see some regression there for him. It was
the touchdown that saved his day.
Exactly, right. He played only 53% of the offensive snaps. So didn't love that from Hurst and Sanders. I mean, I know he was coming off injury, so maybe that's why he wasn't as effective as Hubbard, but it's still, I think Hubbard did look better, like you said, and could potentially eat into those touches. So I'm out on the Panthers offense this week.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
I don't feel like sweating that situation on Monday Night Football in primetime. I would be
I don't need this kind of stress in my life.
No.
I do not need Carolina Panthers on my fantasy rosters. I've been bullish about, Hayden Hurst. Like I said, this is not the matchup to be bullish on any of these guys. Absolutely not.
Yeah, definitely not. All right, let's go to Monday Night Football part 2. Last game of the week, Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kate, let's start with the Steelers. You got the terrible. Yeah. Let's get it out of the way here because man, it was a struggle in week 1 and it could potentially be a struggle in week 2. So what are you looking for here from the Steelers against the Browns?
The interesting thing, like I mean, as a Steelers fan, I'm really hoping that was a huge anomaly. Yeah. I want to see this team get back to the run a little bit. Saw a really nice explosive run from Najee Harris, a couple of carries, like even though the snap counts, favored, were pretty fairly even. Like, we saw Najee Harris get 6 attempts, 31 rushing yards, 5.2 yards per attempt. I think that this is going to be one of these slower scoring games. Like this isn't going to be a powerhouse matchup. And I think the Steelers defense, like this is definitely going to be an interesting week, particularly given the absence of Cam Hayward, who's been the team's top graded rush defender over the last 3 years. Like there has been no defensive player that has been as instrumental in stopping the run as Cam Hayward, and they haven't even always been successful at that. So like I have a feeling it's going to be Nick Chubb running all over this Pittsburgh Steelers offense or defense. I have a feeling it's going to be Jerome Ford also running all over this defense. Saw 15 rush attempts in week 1. Like genuinely think that Jerome Ford could be a a surprise viable flex play if you're in desperation. But, on the Pittsburgh side of the ball, they're going to need to establish some sort of run. I still think Najee Harris is the guy that we're going to see, more on first and second downs. But I think given the fact that this team literally totaled 9 rush attempts from the running back core, I think we're going to see probably a more concerted effort to get that going. Yeah. The game just spiraled out of control so quickly that I don't really think we got to evaluate anybody. But, unfortunately, also for the Steelers, we have Deontay Johnson, who's out. I think George Pickens is a fine start. I think probably the workload the target share that we would usually see from Deontay Johnson is just kind of going to be sprinkled among the remaining players. Might see, more involvement from Calvin Austin, second year wide receiver, on the smaller side, but they seem to be, going to him over and over again. But like, if you don't have to start your Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't want to start my Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, I think there has to be more of an emphasis for their run game in this one, because especially with Deontay Johnson out and the way that offensive line looked last week, they ranked dead last in pass blocking grade last week. Pittsburgh did, and people I think might be tempted to start George Pickens. I'd just be a little bit hesitant myself because of the matchup. We know the Browns defensive line was legit. They had the fastest time to pressure in week 1 as well, which led to a third highest quick pressure rate in the league. Pickens and Allen Robinson ran the most routes for the team in week 1 on pressure dropbacks, and Pickens only saw 3 targets on those routes compared to Robinson's 5, and even Jaylen Warren got 4. So ended up with just 2 catches for 18 yards on those pressure dropbacks. So I'm really staying away from the Pittsburgh Steelers passing offense in this game. Najee's probably the one that I think I would be okay with starting, because I do believe that they would have to run the ball a little bit more, but again, not an ideal matchup against a very good Browns defense. At least that's what they showed in week 1. So how about on the Brown side? Anybody there? I know Amari Cooper dealing with an injury a little bit and only played, I think, 62% of the snaps. And Elijah Moore was mixed in there. Donovan Peoples-Jones. Anybody other than Nick Chubb on the Brown side that you'd want to play in this one?
Elijah Moore is kind of interesting to me, especially, given the fact that these Steelers kind of struggled to, stop, some of the yards after the catch historically. Like, that's been a big problem area. I don't know that this defensive unit has that problem solved. I think he could be in an interesting spot, to play some sort of role, especially if Amari Cooper is banged up. I think he's a fine flex play, but not necessarily looking to target anybody in this offense outside of Nick Chubb, of course. Just given the fact that this is probably going to be like a low scoring game, probably going to be more, hopefully going to be more of a defensive matchup, especially on the Steelers side of the equation here. But this isn't going to be one of these matchups that you're going to be like excited to do your showdown lineups in, because I'm probably in my showdown lineups for this game, it's probably going to be Steelers defense, Browns defense, and the kickers probably.
Yeah. Are we allowed to put IDPs in the showdown lineup? Could we put Myles Garrett and TJ Watt in there? Because it's good that those are going to be the guys to watch, because I do think it's going to be one of those defensive battles more than anything. So that's gonna do it. Wrapping up another episode of the PFF Fantasy Podcast. Thank you to everyone who tuned into this to listen. It was a big episode, obviously, after we get all that data from week 1 to kind of break it all down here for week 2. So thank you for listening. Thank you to Kate for joining me and helping me to break it all down. Kate, before you go, please let the people know what you have up on pff.com this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Debuted 2 new columns for PFF, which I'm super excited about. Going to be coming out every week. We've got the fantasy football rushing report. Also got time to panic, or week 1 antics, where I break down some fantasy stats that maybe were a little bit surprising from week 1 and whether or not we should buy into them moving forward. And then, got a last second waiver claim column coming out on Friday. So be sure to check that out. If you are one of these rosters that is just kind of hanging around waiting for injury news, if you find yourself in case of emergency, I've got you covered.
Nice. Love that. That's great stuff. Be sure to check all that out. As for me, IDP rankings, we got the IDP fantasy report up on the website as well. Also debuting the wide receiver man and zone performance against those coverages report. That's up on the website now. It's free to check out, looking at how each wide receiver has performed throughout the season against specific defensive coverages, and then who their opponents are that week, what their defensive coverage tendencies have been. So I'm looking to try to find some matchups to target in there. And then the O-line, D-line matchups to target and avoid will also be out on Friday as well. Other than that, Nate and I will be back Sunday night again, I think, to recap week 2. And thank you all again for tuning in. Until next time, peace out.